My name is Mikunj Joshi. As you heard earlier, what I'm going to do is take you through a story, right, of everything you've heard this morning with Nitin talking about multi-cloud, multi-platform synchronization. I'm going to sort of walk you through that in the context of a story in healthcare. And again, as you mentioned as you heard in the introduction, I run the healthcare and life science practice at Accion Labs. Avid reader. Frederick asked yesterday, paper or not. I'm the audible guy. I'm the audio guy in that, and love cricket. So let me set the stage. 2020, first quarter. We all knew what happened. COVID-19. Within 2 months, we saw a 38 times increase in the number of telehealth visits, 38 times. And before the pandemic, 2 months before that, we were at 1%. And from there, it went to as high as 70% in case of certain services. The interesting trend to note is watch how the graphs not come back. And I don't think it's going to. We are still looking at an average of about 30% utilization of services using telehealth across, if you take an average across the different health services. With that as a context, what I want to do is, and again, I think either somebody in your family, you, or at least most people have a general idea of what a telehealth experience look like. But let me just walk you through the process, right? So typically what you would expect is that as a patient or as a caregiver for somebody, you would want to go somewhere. There are multiple models of doing this. Search for care. Okay, I want either a particular surgery, I want to go see a particular physician, and then what you would want as part of this holistic process is for you to be able to get the physicians that are empaneled in that, get their schedules with one click, make a very simple appointment, get your reminders before the visit, and then get onto a session like you see there on your step number 3, where you have your physician on one side, you as a patient on the other side. And if you look at it from a physician's perspective, I don't know if you can read that top bar there, they can see what their next appointment is, and so on. And then, again, talking from a physician's perspective, once the visit is done, you need to take care of billing, you're taking off your clinical notes, making any follow-up appointments, etc. Right? Fairly simple. I'm going to keep the conversation simple because although I'm presenting a use case from healthcare, you will hopefully be able to relate this to a number of other use cases in your own industries. Right? So the idea is to just not get too hung up and deep down into healthcare, but rather drive the bigger picture. So now let's open the hood and see what a typical telemedicine or telehealth platform looks like, right? What are the underlying components? Again, I'll keep it very commonsensical, right? Let's start at 6 o'clock, bottom of that screen. So I need to know as of, let's say, a physician, who the patient is, get their clinical history. So that's all typically stored in what is typically called an electronic medical record. As I mentioned earlier, you need a scheduler. That way you can make the appointment, get the reminders, etc. And then as you keep going cyclical, you'll see that you have a billing system, you have some kind of a communication system where you are sending those reminders out, sending letters, sending bills out. You have an e-prescription system where you are prescribing medicines for the patient. You're doing a lab ordering if it's needed. And obviously the most basic component, which is a video audio conferencing system. Right? So these are typically what you would expect as a telemedicine, the components of a telemedicine system with a very strong sort of an electronic medical record that sits in the center of all of this the process. Now, you heard Nitin talk about pace of change. And healthcare, again, it's a cliche, but it's true that pace of change, and I love how Nitin presented this, and it's very, very important. Pace of change, some of it is by design. Healthcare is extremely regulated, as you know, very, very sensitive. And so the pace of change has to, in for a lot of reasons, needs to be consciously slowed down because you want to ensure that you have very, very tight regulatory compliances, etc. Right? That said, within 2 months, you suddenly face a big spike of 38 times in this. And now how do you adopt, right? So how do you go up that pace ladder at such a fast pace. And this is sort of where our experience working with client partners during that phase and since has come in. This whole idea was, how do we take all of these systems, most of them being fairly disparate because they were very, very good at their silos. For example, SureScripts is a leader in e-prescriptions. There are multiple systems in lab ordering, and each one of them very specialized by different healthcare services. Now, imagine a situation like this, and now how do you adopt this to a fast world of virtual care? Now, that said, take a look at this. This is actually screenshots of what we have seen at a bunch of clients. This is what a typical physician experience looks like. And by the way, imagine this and you toggling across all these screens while the patient is with you on a teleconference or in front of you, even worse, right? Most physicians on an average toggle between 7 to 8 screens in the middle of their interaction with their patients. Is anybody surprised that therefore they have a complete lack of empathy and what comes across as lack of attention towards their patient? I have empathy for providers, actually the doctors. Look at this, right? And they each look different. One of them is a desktop application that you see on your top left, right, with tabs. The other one is a web-based application that's doing something else. The fifth one is there, on the bottom right of your screen is where their next appointment is. And I swear I've not made this up. I've actually taken screenshots of actual applications that folks use. And just look at this. And look at this, color coding. Each color means something. Each color means, is it a follow-up appointment? Is this an appointment for say if it was a behavioral health thing, a ketamine treatment, which is very, very sensitive. These are powerful drugs that need to be very closely monitored with a very high risk of compliance issues and regulatory issues. You're already under so much pressure, and then this is what you face with. And then this augmented with that 38x increase in terms of people now stopping to walk in and and instead want a virtual care visit. With that as a background, we have had numerous instances of, okay, then how do you adapt to this? How do you accelerate the adoption? Before I go there, let me very quickly articulate you this problem statement. I showed you this from a provider's perspective, a doctor's perspective. Very quickly, I know it's a slightly busy slide, but what I wanted to show you is from 4 or 5 different personas, the challenges, right? Look at an operational team. Scheduling is in one system, the provider schedule is somewhere, the patient is coming from a social media feed that you posted. So they clicked a link and they said, okay, you know what, I've always been meaning to get a, let's say a psychology consulting, right? I want to do it discreetly, so I'm going to keep it virtual care. So they've come through a web-based or a social media interface. Your scheduling is sitting in another system. Now, how is the patient going to basically get to it, right? So these are some of the challenges that an operational team faces, which is why the patient has no choice but to call the operations team and book an appointment. Once that call comes in, the operations team has to figure out, okay, who is my next available doctor? Which is my next available room? Where are my next available, ketamine treatment facilities available, etc. My patient records are all over the place. I'd come last month, but since then I've had a visit to a different hospital, which is on Epic. Last one was on Cerner. So now as an operations team, I got to figure out, oh, where did you go to? Oh, I went to UT Austin. Oh, okay, now let me go log into that system or retrieve your records, or can you please scan those, fax those into me? Very, very high no-show rates even today in telemedicine, right? Very easy for you to make the appointment, and unless you have a very strong, big cancellation fees, no-show is a very common thing. I already touched upon, physicians' challenges. You saw that in the previous slide. One thing I will sort of mention there is the billing element, right? No easy way. Separately we can talk about this, but industry statistics say that post-interactions, physicians spend 28% of their time rectifying bills or taking clinical notes, right? I mean, that's a significant amount of time. An average physician in the US makes $450,000. And you multiply that with health systems that have hundreds of physicians empaneled. I mean, look at the cost of this, right? What can we do about it? Look at it from a patient's perspective. Very difficult care discovery, right? I can come from different mediums, but I just have no access to what's going on. Lack of price transparency. Again, separately, you can talk to Satya about this. Price transparency is becoming a very, very big deal, not just in the pharmacy space, but across the healthcare system. I want to know exactly what my visit is going to cost me, how much my co-pays and co-insurances are going to be before I come in. Again, challenges of keeping things, benefits into different systems. makes this problem even more exasperated. From an administrator's perspective, I want to make sure that before you come in, see, notice how when we all go to hospitals, our average wait times are in tens of minutes, right? It should be, we know everything should be ready when we get there. But the reason for that is because for compliance reasons, they have to check your eligibility, they have to check your insurance information. Again, multiple systems. On an average, by the way, a physician checks 8 systems. A typical administrator checks 17 systems on a typical healthcare visit across all this. I mean, you can see how, the flows are and the complexity that's involved. Last but not the least, look at it from a hospital systems perspective. Who are my empaneled physicians? Who is in network, out of network? When an appointment comes in, who's available, who's not, who's on vacation? How do I avoid gaps? One of the biggest frustrations for physicians, I got an appointment at 9:30, and if I leave it open to others to fix this for me, my next one is at 10:30, with the 9:30 one being only 20 minutes. Now I suddenly have a 40-minute gap. It's just so inefficient, right? You start and stop your operation. So with all of these things, what's the new way? What are the new ways of looking at this? Because, again, going back to what Nitin was saying, the pace of change of some of these systems by design has to be slow. And Epic, Cerner, eClinicalWorks, these are systems where just between Epic and Cerner, 88% of the US population is in one of their systems. And you cannot expect seismic changes and quick adoptions to happen. So with that, what do, right? So here is a concerto, right, using the symphony theme, right? A concerto of what a telehealth system beyond just simple video calls can look like. I know it's again a busy slide, but I think you'll get the broad themes. If you look at the blue boxes, right, on the periphery, all they're saying is, rather than, and let me take a step back, right? So historically, and in the interest of time, what has happened? System integrators have come in and built point solutions. Shikhar sort of alluded to that 80% of what they then end up having to do is basically build point solutions. Okay, let's connect the scheduling system with our outbound communication system so that patients can see the provider's schedules and quickly book appointments. But then that problem, as you can imagine, with the number of integration points just continues to keep getting more and more trickier. Instead, what we prescribe as part of this symphony, and again, the symphony is not just about connecting systems. The symphony is also about some of the things. Nitin said he was not going to use Gen AI, and neither am I. But the idea is, think of how can we do more? It's a complex system as is, but what can we do beyond that? So take a look at this, right? Again, I'll go clockwise, starting from the top. So what that says is an identity management system, right? The idea is, rather than connecting with individual systems, so if you go to hospital number 1, they are on a Cerner through an Okta-based integration. Then you go to hospital number 2, they are on Epic, through a Keycloak. Each time, rather than building specific point solutions, how about, as part of this symphony, building an IAM layer that is essentially able to abstract you from some of these underlying principles and take that philosophy as part of the platform symphony. As you keep going clockwise, and again, I'm not going to go through details on all of them, but just to give you a flavor, it talks about interoperability. See, we've expanded. We're not calling it EMR integration or data integration. Interoperability. Now it's been more than 18 months, Interoperable Care Act came out, and it has mandated health systems with a patient's click of a button to share and mandate that all of their information is shared. So why don't we build layers that are connected with all of the EMRs on the back end? As I keep going, schedulers, billing, different systems. Now, in each one of them, the bubbles that you see at the bottom are platforms that have ready solutions in the market to some extent. I've been talking to a lot of folks, and one of the challenges in adopting platforms out of the box is, they don't usually meet the needs that you specifically have. But each of these will, get you to about 80% of where you need to be, and that's where the rest of the orchestration pieces come in, right? Again, we can talk about that in more detail. The idea, again, is this holistic, symphony-like orchestration and thinking along the different areas. Again, a slightly busy slide, and I'm going to end with this. So what? So what happens with all of this, right? So if you look at it and take each of the problem statements, now with your multiple scheduling systems all integrated through a single interface that is exposed through very basic APIs, you can build a simple layer that sits on top of it, simple user interface where administrative teams, all the other teams are able to look at physician calendars. You're able to use very simple machine learning rules that say that when I look at a physician's schedule and I'm offering time slots to patients, I'm going to make sure that they are contiguous so that physician doesn't have a start and stop in their schedules. Very simple things which previously were not possible because you had very, very disparate systems. A single interface where you can book your rooms, all your resources, single systems with integration into the different EMRs. Patient engagement, this is the biggest challenge in healthcare. Education to patients, direct communication with them. I mean, believe it or not, I built my first patient engagement and direct communication system back in 2005. And patient interactions and communication, even today, are now they've moved to the mid-teen levels. They were single-digit percentage for almost a decade since. So this ability to bring all of the information for the patient onto a single platform facilitates that. Longitudinal access to patient data. Again, it's cliched, but it's, I think, one of the toughest problems in healthcare. You go from hospital 1 to 2, your data needs to move with it. So easy to say it. I mean, one can spend 2 weeks talking about it, and folks have spent 20 years, and there are companies that are spinning up, platforms that are spinning up, Health Gorilla, VC, where what they are now trying to do is take this idea of HIEs. So these are health information exchanges that are regional in nature. So for example, Oregon has one, right? So in Oregon, all the health systems are connected by one regional health record system. How amazing would it be if you can just put a layer on top of it? So if somebody from Massachusetts were traveling to Oregon, even when they went back to their home base and went to a local physician, they would be able to see all of their records. So that's the whole idea of getting longitudinal patient records across their entire episodes of care. Online video consultation, again, much more enhanced experience where, I don't know if you noticed that in the first slide. I will just go back there real quick. Again, the physician here is not only just talking to the patient, but they're able to, from the same system, put an e-prescription, a medical record. So they're not doing this toggling that I showed you across 7 different systems. You're able to actually bring all of them to a single user interface. So that's the whole idea of an online video consultation that's fully immersive. And then last but not the least, use emerging technologies like machine learning, Gen AI, LLMs, to be able to take voice transcriptions. I mean, this is, again, a big area. Suki, Nuance, they're doing a lot of work in this area where they're listening to operating room chatter, they're listening to a patient and provider interaction, auto-transcribing it, generating multiple sets of things, but broadly 2 things, very well organized clinical notes, very specific clinical data from it, and posting it directly to electronic medical records with the doctor's approval, right? So those are, once you have this symphony in place, it's much easier for you to be able to, sort of add this. Again, using one of Shikhar's term, you want to be the master of integration, right? So you want to be your own master. This is the whole idea. In healthcare, becoming the master of data and system of records is very difficult because you heard this in a session yesterday as well. By its very nature, system of records will remain disparate in healthcare. I think it's, and you also saw this in Mandar's presentation where he put healthcare on the top quadrant simply because the variety of data is extremely high. So in that kind of an environment, these are the kind of things that I want to encourage everyone to think at. Again, like I said, although I've presented this in the context of telehealth, I think the applicability of this is across a lot of different systems. And when you take this presentation and what Shikhar was talking about, I hope you get the idea of broader multi-cloud, multi-platform sort of symphony and what are the advantages, the why. See, the idea is why one should do it. This was the case for that. Again, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Mikunj.
So in the telehealth platform Mikunj showed, Accion has worked on it, and one of the idea of in today's environment is how long does it take you to do it? If you do it from a typical conventional way to do it, it's multi-year projects. And we have been part of that as well, but today, using the Symphony approach and platforms with industry cloud, whether it's Salesforce or Microsoft, and again, we're not suggesting a specific platform, they accelerate your ability to innovate faster with that instead of building it from scratch. So I think that's where you need to really look at how do you accelerate your pace of change to keep up with the environment changes that are happening around you.
That's a great point, Nitin. As I mentioned, those platforms, right? Doxy, VC, Salesforce Health Cloud, ServiceNow, it provides you with different components with which you can very quickly accelerate and build these integrations and a symphony.
Mikunj, a basic question. What's the difference between telehealth and telemedicine?
Like I said, I promised not to get into the technicalities, but somebody's forced me there, so I'll say it. Telemedicine is limited to your video and audio conferencing. Telehealth is a more holistic approach to it, so which includes e-prescriptions, labs, multiple kinds of treatment options, etc. So again, still keeping it fairly simple, think of telehealth as more of a broader approach to healthcare and your holistic health, where typically, one session you would potentially even have multiple specialty physicians showing up, whereas telemedicine is limited to simply the video conferencing aspects of it.
Thank you for bringing that difference. How do we ensure the sensitivity of the data among the telehealth systems, especially using managed cloud services?
Yeah, so I get this question all the time, right? Because healthcare is HIPAA, PHI, you've heard other presenters talk about this. In the last decade, probably slightly more, most industry standard available cloud platforms are HIPAA and PHI compliant. I strongly urge all of our client partners, everyone I have a conversation with, and because a lot of people don't know this, these are actually inheritable. So when you build your entire solution on an Azure cloud, you've actually inherited Microsoft's investments into actually making the entire platform HIPAA and PHI compliant, right? So that's one approach. And then again, going back to Mandar's presentation from yesterday, if you're building layers of Symphony on top of it, you have to continue to remain mindful of your system of records, data in transit, data in storage. And again, this is where, from a systemic thinking perspective, our going-in approach, at least my going-in approach into a lot of conversations is, don't try and co-host healthcare data and across multiple systems. If possible, try and leverage things like in-streaming analytics. Even if you're building a very complex clinical decision support system, the level of sophistication of in-streaming analytics has got to the point where you're able to actually take data from a system, analyze it, create the insights, desensitize that data, but never use that data or store it locally. So I mean, there's a much deeper conversation, but the idea is leverage the platforms today that are already HIPAA and PHI compliant and build on top of them.
In case of healthcare platforms, how are these platforms preparing to integrate with broader ecosystem of wearable devices and IoT, particularly for remote patient monitoring and engagement?
Yeah, very, very big push in that area. That said, in spite of all the hoopla and all the discussions, just so you know, only about less than 2% of healthcare data is self-reported. And go ask any physician, they'll tell you they almost never rely on that either, because minus a very, very few commercial FDA-approved devices, a lot of the device data can not readily be used. Now, that said, big trend going in that direction. Again, one of the things we are starting to see over the last 3 or 4 years is non-invasive devices, not just in human health. We recently started working with a company where they actually have a remote device that actually monitors equine horse health by putting them in stables throughout, and where remotely they're actually monitoring equine health, especially from a cardiology perspective. So I mean, again, and these are all usually cloud connected, and we're able to actually collate the data. There are, again, just sticking to the platform theme, again, there are multiple cloud platforms. Look up a company called Gorilla Health. They are really good at being able to take data, convert that into industry standards so that then it becomes, to the second part of the question about how you then integrate into the broader ecosystem is by leveraging platforms and layers of abstraction of this nature. and building that symphony.
So while we're talking about these platforms, what metrics does the platform offer for tracking and reporting on improved clinical outcomes resulting from its use?
Yeah, so one of the things you might have seen on the slide is ACA NCQS certification. Again, the idea is, and again, going back to Nitin's point, just building a NCQS certified accountable care act compatibility, a very, very complex word for the simple word of how do you know you're taking good care of your patients? It typically will take you months, if not a couple of years, to build something like that. There are reporting platforms available that can ingest denormalize healthcare data and provide you reporting as a service or compliance as a service. It's become nomenclature in the market now. It's very commonplace.
So while we're talking on compliance, so how are data privacy compliance requirements being addressed when there are systems listening into conversations between patient and medical professionals or the chatter in operation rooms?
Yeah, so these are all to be done in the context of and after a patient's approval. So it goes without saying. Again, like I said, there's this very hyped up oversensitivity around privacy and confidentiality. It's absolutely paramount, but this is sort of what has paralyzed the healthcare ecosystem, right? And now there are proven processes in place where with the patient's approval, you can listen into that conversation, right? Look up Nuance, look up Suki. There are other solutions that we've actually built at Accion. I would love to show you and talk to you more about that, where with the patient's approval, you can listen into it, you can transcribe that data, and be stored into the EMR. Because, I mean, one can make the argument that eventually once even the physician, when they're typing it into their tablet, is eventually going into an EMR. If that can all be secured, why not go that additional step and be able to improve and improvise the entire system end to end, while still always keeping privacy at the front and center of everything.
Last question, Mikunj. While we ensure data is safe, data is not duplicated, how do you make sure the doctors are not fake? Are we tracking?
That the doctors are not fake. I'm assuming the context of the question is fraud. Yeah, and again, this is a whole another discipline in healthcare called credentialing. And your doctor will be as fake in person or online. It just doesn't matter, right? So when you go visit a physician, I mean, how do you know they're not? Are you relying on the degree that they post on their walls? I mean, I hope you don't. But it's the same idea. There is, but here's the best part of this. Part of the symphony could also be not only you discovering care, but when you get a physician, click on that link, learn more about them. All of their credentialing, how long have they been practicing is all available online. I think most of you might have gone through something like this. This can only be enhanced further by bringing in more and more credentialing information. It's called credentialing in healthcare, where you know that this is somebody who's been practicing in this discipline for how many ever years and what certifications, etc. have they got. So all of this can be built, again, as commonsensical as it sounds, pay visit to some of these things next time you go to your doctor and you will see how many of these components are missing on your typical doctor's visits globally.